agenda is pretty simple. We will do introductions. Vikash will then walk us through how to stop chasing these skills and creating those signals. We aim to have a robust Q&A. And as always, as you know, at Sidebar here, we value feedback. So we'll pause for NPS feedback and close. So just quickly, in terms of introductions, my name is Shubha. I'm your facilitator today. I've been a Sidebar member for about a couple of years now, and I'll be at the summit, and I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully a few faces there in 2 weeks. Work-wise, I have what's called a portfolio of AI, generative AI, and agentic work. I'm a product manager by craft and training. And right now, I'm a fractional, what's called a chief AI officer at a generative AI startup called Wayfound.ai. I also advise, and I'm a product mentor at startup accelerators and to a couple of other generative AI companies. And I also teach AI, generative AI, and agentic transformation to companies and corporations of various sizes. I am extremely excited and pleased to introduce Vikash. I'm sure Vikash would go into a little bit more detail of his experience and how he is possibly one of the best candidates to walk us through this title and topic right now. But just a couple of things for me that stood out in Vikash's experience and profile is that Vikash literally launched his career in aerospace. I mean, as a kid, we all think about dreaming of becoming a pilot. And then we grow up and we realize that actually aerospace research, scientist, engineering is much more than a dream. But Vikash actually, did that and then pivoted into software engineering in companies like Cisco. And he then founded a company called E-Lagan, which actually I remember from my time in India, which is the TurboTax, of India. Now for the last close now to 7 years, he's a lead product manager at Meta, working on Llama, their flagship LLM foundational model and platform. We're so excited to have Vikash, be a part of this and help educate and enlighten all of us. By the way, he also teaches at Stanford, a GenAI for product managers course. And I will link his course details in our chat for all of us to kind of check out too. Without any further ado, Vikash, the floor is all yours. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Subhash. Thanks a lot, everyone, for taking your time to kind of join in and listen to me here. Subha, I'm super impressed with your research here. I forgot that I work for an aerospace company. Almost nobody has brought that up for many, many years. So thank you for bringing that up, and really appreciate the thoughtful introduction. So I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully folks can see it. Yeah, okay, great. So, one of the things that, as I teach generative AI quite a bit, over 3,000 people so far, both within Meta and outside, one of the things that I continuously hear about is folks want to switch into a generative AI role. And that could be within the same company, within their product, they're trying to kind of get into bringing more generative AI, or finding new roles outside. And of course, because I teach a course, most of the questions to me is about building that skill, is hey, how can I build that skill more? And as I kind of do that more and more, I realize that, of course, skills are super important. But at some point, I have to tell them is stop chasing the skills, right? There is, you can keep learning about things as long as you want, but unless you are signaling, you're not going to be able to kind of get to the GenAI roles that you want. And we'll get into the details of what it means. But before that, look, I think this is a great time to learn about generative AI or transition into a generative AI role. I fundamentally believe that every product in the future would be an AI product. And if your product is not using AI or GenAI in some way or form, either to kind of build it or embedding it into the product, you are doing something wrong. And I think the opportunity to kind of like transition, even if you're not looking for a job, into becoming a product manager who understands how to kind of build generative AI products and getting that opportunity is a very large one. It's even more larger mainly because a lot of the people talk about AI, and especially very true if you go to LinkedIn or Twitter or anywhere else, right? X. However, very few people out of that actually use AI. And even smaller set of folks are actually building AI products. My hope is that more and more folks kind of like go into the smaller box here where generative AI is something that you're building towards. And like, you're building products, you're known as the people who are kind of building this generative AI product. And as like Sam Altman put it, like this is the most interesting year in the human history, except for all the future years, thanks partially to kind of like the generative AI progress that we are seeing. But before that, like, why should you listen to me, right? Like, just kind of give you a quick sense. I actually have been very confused about generative AI myself, even though I'm kind of like teaching it and whatnot. And I was not sure when generative AI came in 2022, it's like, what is the good way to kind of leverage this and go about doing this? And initially, I started getting super deep into the technical details of the generative AI, and which is a lot of I think it's super important. But I think I thought that doing more and more of the technical mastery is going to lead me to being a better Gen AI product manager. However, I had a breakthrough moment when I discovered that signaling and reach played a significant role, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Right. Just a quick journey, mainly because I think it kind of shows how I kind of got here. I've actually switched my career 8 times. I started out as a chip designer. Even before this, like the 2010, like I was a chip designer building chips. At some point, I got super interested in AI by taking the Andrew Ng's course. If many folks would have heard of that. And I read this article in 2016 about Google, which is the Great AI Awakening, which called out that how Google is transitioning to a completely AI company quite a bit. I actually then took an opportunity in a very systems company. It's a company called Infinera. We ship boxes but transition the company to become like a cognitive network AI company by focusing on telling them that this was possible only because a lot of my managers and like the CEO and everybody else knew my passion for AI. And when there was an opportunity that arose in a company which nobody could have ever thought would be an AI company, they looked up me first because there's like, hey, we know only this one guy who talks about AI all day long, and maybe that is the guy we should kind of bring. And this kind of shows shows that the signaling can help. Not to kind of bore through the whole thing, but I also changed my career into the Llama. Towards the end, I'll tell you like how I got into the Llama team, just through signaling. But by the end of the session, you will learn a framework, what I call is the SSR, right? And which is the signal, skill, reach. And how do you kind of break into the Gen AI roles and avoid the common mistakes? And the biggest mistake that I've seen people make is, they believe that if I just take the Gen AI course and build AI skills, I will automatically get hired, right? The reality is the job market is flooded with learners now, so more than any other time. The ones who stand out is their, they have some signal which kind of talks about like they are an expert in this space, and they are able to kind of maximize the reach of the signals to the people who matter. If you only focus on the skills and you never care to kind of signal them, how will your hiring managers or the team comes to know that you exist, right? Towards that, I want to actually share 3 secrets. Number 1 is you don't need a PhD to be an effective Gen AI PM. I will talk a little bit more. You also must signal publicly and privately your expertise and you must expand your network to kind of like get hired. Uh, the the key thing that most because a lot of the product managers are also I was an engineer. I'm sure a lot of you were also engineers, or generative AI, or AI was considered to be a highly technical space. Right? This false beliefs also comes from the fact that AI used to be heavily technical, right? If you're building ranking algorithms, if you're building search algorithms, if you're building any other kind of two-tower architecture or anything else on AI, this was true. You really needed to kind of understand a lot of the technology, right? But the reality is generative AI has made it much simpler for you to kind of like build generative AI products, mainly because a lot of this is possible through prompting and tools which are available that you don't necessarily have to deeply understand. It's great to deeply understand, by the way. I'm not discouraging the fact that you shouldn't. However, the bigger myth is just by knowing the algorithm, you only get to where engineers are today, right? Like you are trying to be an engineer. The reality is the value that the product managers bring is aligning your AI capability and the data with the business users and the needs. So if you're only focusing on the technology and you don't know how to kind of like bring that into your product building, then you're not going to be able to kind of like do this enough. Secret number two is quiet learner, right? If you just quietly learn about all of these things, and even though you have a pretty good sense of how to kind of build a product, but if you don't signal this, nobody would ever know. Like the hiring managers will never come to know about this. And with the opportunity, if you don't expand your network to the folks where generative AI is being used today, those signals will go into vain. Sometimes you may find yourself in a job where maybe your immediate manager or the team does not see the value of generative AI, and they're like, hey guys, we have so much to kind of win without getting into the generative AI. But if you think that this space is important to you, and if you think that this is the right thing to kind of do, sometimes you may have to expand into other groups within the company, other product areas, other folks who might be kind of like driving those initiatives, or different companies altogether where this is useful, right? And this is where I come up with the skills, signal, and the reach. You acquire the skills. Without the skills, of course, you can't signal, right? You will only go so far if you don't actually know the topics. You don't have to be a PhD, but you have to have a pretty strong skill. You must showcase your skills, and then you find opportunity to kind of drive this. Let's talk about skills a little bit, right? Skills is fundamentally the AI skills that is required to be a product manager is actually changing, mainly because the way we build software is changing. There is an article by Andres Karpathy that everybody should look at, and I'll try to link into this document as well, is fundamentally there was a shift from software to software 2.0, which went from a deterministic software writing to a probabilistic software. And that required product managers to think very differently about how do we build probabilistic products. This is not product that we can build in a typical waterfall kind of a model, where you're starting with a particular problem area, and then you deterministically know that in 3 months or 6 months it can be solved. That means it requires a mindset shift from moving from a deterministic to a probabilistic. And now in the last month or two, there's something called vibe coding that has come up, which is using tools like V0 and Replit and everything else, where people believe that they can actually provide prompt and generate complete software, end-to-end software using just vibe coding. Things like Cursor and others are also changing. This is changing the pace at which the software is built, the way the software is built. And if you don't acquire skills here to kind of like build the systems properly, and you don't change your mindset, you're going to find yourself being left behind a little bit, right? To be an expert, I think the steps are, you must start from being curious. This is where I actually see a lot of people fail, when they come to a skill, they come with a negative mindset of like, well, is there really something to kind of learn here? Do I actually have to kind of learn? If you don't come to be an expert in anything, if you don't start with curiosity and you don't believe that this can be a possibility, I don't think you should start climbing the ladder at all. Because what you will see is you will see challenges everywhere. You will see is like, oh, I gave this prompt to the model and the model gave me this hilarious output. Like these models are not good for anything. And then you laugh it out. Your focus becomes finding faults rather than finding opportunity. There is a very nice saying by a famous statistician, which says that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And this is actually was written for statistical models. And this is so true in today's world where everybody can find a mistake or hundreds of mistakes in different models which are out there. The question is there a way for you to kind of take that one or two opportunities that these models provide that has never been possible before? And are you able to ship a product that can help your users do better? Right? So in a skill, you, of course, you cannot be a generative AI PM without being like, you still have to be a product manager. And by the way, this is probably the most relevant skill still, because what I've seen is most of the time people actually try to build fancy AI technology, while forgetting the fact that users still have to kind of like have problems there. We have to be able to kind of measure progress. We have to be able to kind of like work as a team and XFN. You do need the AI PM skills. You do need the generative AI stack. You need the domain knowledge in which you are actually working. Domain knowledge is becoming more and more relevant now. And of course, if you are interviewing, then you also need interviewing skill, which is a completely different skill, not necessarily useful in a day-to-day, but as anybody of you would have gone through that interview, know that interviewing is also a skill now. But what about the signal, right? A lot of people start with an approach that give me the opportunity and I will deliver, right? Like they want to, you generally approach your hiring manager or opportunity is like, guys, I've never done it. Like I don't know GenAI, but I really, really want to do generative AI. Give me the opportunity and I'll do it. But that does not work. It does not work because of a very interesting phenomena called the market for lemons. This was actually a paper written in 1971, which got a Nobel Prize by a calf. What it says is, if there is a marketplace, and there is a marketplace for everything, and finding a job is also a marketplace. If there are even a single lemon car in the market, people may worry that they may get a lemon if they try to kind of go buy a car. And because of that, they want to see discounts, or they want to see is like, what if the car that I buy can be a lemon? As the number of lemons increase in the market, the probability that the amount of discount that the users are going to ask increases significantly. But that's not the bad part. At some point, if the number of lemons in the market is significant, people just stop buying cars altogether because they're so worried about getting a lemon that they don't want to try out any particular thing. Well, what is a used car market has to do with generative AI, right? Well, in a market where the buyers can't distinguish between the high quality and the low quality products, right? The average price or the value of making a decision actually goes down significantly. In case of a product management, if there are so many people, there's so many gurus on LinkedIn posting about generative AI all day, and like everybody has done a course on generative AI, and then everybody's talking about generative AI. How can hiring managers learn about you being a lemon versus not? And that is something that you have to start signaling, right? If no one can see the quality, you are treated like a lemon, like if they don't have confirmation. A great example of this is actually a degree. So what happens is, if you go to, when you go to a college, to get a degree in bachelor's or PhD or whatever. You are learning as a student, you're learning throughout your career as a student. But till the day you have the degree, the day before the degree, you're not hireable as much. People are not as interested in like hiring you or giving you an offer and everything else. The reason is, it's not that you don't know enough about the system because you have studied the last 4 years, for example, doing engineering or whatever else. But the day you get allocated a degree and you can say, I have a degree in EE from XYZ University, the value increases significantly. And the only thing that has changed is your capability to signal with a degree that you know and understand these things. This is also the reason why a lot of times the signals, like the type of companies that you have worked on, the type of products that you have worked on, they all act as a signal towards is like, oh, if this person works at this place, if this person is also validated by this particular opportunity, probability that this person is a lemon in this particular space is much lower, right? So if you don't signal, you are a lemon by default in the market, right? And if the GenAI job market is super noisy and crowded, people can't tell that you are a quiet learner. They can't tell that you should even be given an opportunity. And one of the biggest, when I talk about this, most folks actually think that, oh, I should write on LinkedIn more often, right? But I think this is really up to you. Each one of you should decide what is the right. But I want to introduce a new concept of something called private signaling, right? Especially so much more important for product managers than anybody else. I think these are some of the things which are true. Like you need to have what if your resume never says GenAI in it because you've never done anything? Then do you expect a GenAI role? Does your LinkedIn say anything about what you have done? And if you're not, like, you can do things like, can you do a side gig? One of the things when I moved from hardware to software, by the way, or like when I was doing chip design and I was trying to kind of move, one of the things I did is I actually built an Alexa app for my kid and I had just done it for fun. I put that on my LinkedIn somewhere at that point. I said, hey, I built an Alexa app, and Alexa was super hot at that time, right? But it got a lot of people actually curious about it. It's like, tell me a little bit about that Alexa app that you built. And I used that as an anchor to switch from hardware to software. Just imagine, like, build an Alexa app over the weekend. It did help my daughter, like with different sounds of, like, she can just ask things like, how do you, how do you actually produce a particular sound or whatever. But even taking a product like that, I was able to change a lot of my interview conversations completely towards software from hardware, right? When you speak with somebody, like when you go out for walks with friends, do they believe that you are the person who understands generative AI? Are you providing them signals in very intimate conversations? A great example of this is like one of my friends, a very close friend of mine, 25 years I've known him. And, we always worked on hardware products before, and he's like, okay, I know you talk about AI quite a bit, but he never believed that I actually know AI as well, right? Like he just always assumed that he's a hardware guy. He was like, man, you've done a good job just kind of like putting up a facade and like going after that. One of these days in the walk, like he was really trying to transition his company to AI, and we ended up chatting about his problem, and we really, really kind of added value to him. That day, it really, even though he's a friend, he comes every other week to my home. I knew that he never fundamentally believed in me, that I knew AI much, right? And that conversation literally changed the way how he kind of thinks about me now. And he has introduced me to like a lot of different opportunities in startups and everything else because of that. So I think one of the biggest mistakes is like, if you're not providing your signals or your thinking in private conversations within the company, do you actually talk about like how generative AI can potentially be introduced in the product? Do you have a forum that you can run locally within the company, let's talk about ways to kind of generate generative AI? Again, A signal works both positive and a negative way. So if you generate garbage as a signal, where all you're doing is like generative AI in every other word that the way you kind of use it, note that people are super smart. Hope most of us are working with like super smart folks. So you wanna definitely have the foundations of the skills. Make sure you're bringing it to the right place in the right format. But start thinking about, are there small opportunities for you to actually introduce? For your LinkedIn and the resume, even if you put like a very small project in there that you have worked, is going to create wonders for you, because you would have actually built the product, hopefully. And then through that, your learning would have gone through the roof, and now you're able to kind of showcase that. I'm going to leave it here. I'll send out the slides later, but I think these are some of the things that you can actually look at as to how you can put it in. I want to actually share one more story about how I kind of got the Llama team's job offer. One of the things I did is, as the O1 product came out from ChatGPT or OpenAI, actually the same night I put out an architecture of what could be a potential architecture of O1. Right. And at this point, nobody has actually talked about the architecture, but I thought about it and everything else. It actually took me a year and a half to break into a generative AI role after I started teaching generative AI. Right. So even though the reason I started teaching was the fact that I wanted to actually get into generative AI, and it's like, hey, if I don't know how to get it, why don't I take a bunch of friends and start teaching them what generative AI is? And that forced me to kind of learn about it. And then when I wrote about that O1 architecture and I posted a architecture which was pretty well done, I believe at that point, given that it was less than 24 hours that the product had come out. I was connected to the Llama product manager, the guy who was leading the whole team. And then he saw my architecture and he said, hey man, that was a pretty good architecture. Do you want to come work for Llama? Right. And so what it took was, of course, my understanding of how this product works. But I also took an opportunity to kind of put out a very high signal product out there. And then I was connected to this person because I worked with them before. So they were able to kind of see it. Imagine if they were not connected, I would put it out to like a bunch of my friends who are also looking for a similar role, and that would not work. Right. And lastly, what I would say is, even in the interviews, I use this quite a bit, is if I'm, when I was talking to the head of engineering at Llama, and says like, hey, let's talk about the architecture. We had a 25-minute slot. A lot of times people think that signaling is, well, it's also important that I wanted to accelerate my signaling within the interview itself. So when they said, how do you go about architecturing a particular product? I just pulled up one of my diagrams that I had. I said, hey, look, instead of kind of redrawing this whole thing, is it okay if I kind of like just show you what I already have in terms of architecture that I would think? And let's talk about that one specific aspect of it. And what it allowed me to do is like cut down 10 minutes of the time that would have taken to actually accelerate into the same point without having that diagram. I knew that I had only 25 minutes and this was a very tough interview to kind of crack. And I wanted to do, and I do a few other things like this, where I accelerated a lot of these discussions so that I can get to the double, triple clicks of the discussions by having this ready. So don't think of signals as just putting out tweets and LinkedIn's and everything else. Think about these things as like every conversation that we have, how do you provide the highest value to the person who's talking to you, and they walking away from that particular aspect, right? I'm not going to get into the reach. It's beyond like the topic, but I think get into some of the discussions with how do we, I'll just share with one last example of how I kind of connected the reach when I was looking for a job at Meta. This was many years ago. I knew that because I came from a hardware product management background, it would be almost impossible for me to kind of get a job interview at Meta. So I actually connected to over 45 different recruiters at Meta on LinkedIn, and knowing that everybody else would be like a second degree connection or somehow connected to each other. Out of the 45 people, only 4 people accepted my request, and one of them agreed to kind of talk to me, who got me into the loop, right? I knew that getting to the loop was the most important part, and I didn't send them my resume because I knew that the minute they look at my resume, the resume was not emitting the right signals. So I actually cleared my first round of interviews without ever giving them a resume. The recruiter kept asking me for the resume. It's like, hey man, we don't have your resume. You're going into the interview tomorrow. It's like, oh, super busy, man. Like, I can't send you my resume, but we'll talk, because I was so afraid that if I send them my resume, they're not going to talk to me, right? So find out your own opportunities, ways, signals. I knew that the best channel for the signal was in person, where I can get this person on the phone, right? So all my effort went into getting this recruiter on the phone and then providing the signal. It wasn't about like sending him multitude of like, signals which were not concrete. So knowing where to provide the signal, how to provide the signals is important. That's all I have. Love to take questions.
Vikash, thank you so much. I learned so much about the, public versus private signal, and that, just doing the work is one part of it, but actually giving the signs out in more concrete ways is so important for us to be able to show our expertise. No, it's a great lesson. I'm learning a lot. We have a few questions coming in, one public and a couple of private ones, but let's take the one that has actually just come in for us. Michelle, do you want to ask the question live?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you again for all this. It's super helpful and inspiring. So thank you for sharing. Talking about these folks, obviously it's very buzzy right now. Which companies do you think are really embracing and leading with Gen AI initiatives in a really positive and thoughtful way?
Actually, there's a lot of discussion about that. And this is the first time what people are finding, that the enterprises are proactively looking to kind of switch to generative AI more than any other technology. However, there is a lot of confusion around what is the level of generative AI they should do. There is even confusion around, like, does it mean that we use something like ChatGPT within the company? Is that what switching to generative AI is? Do we actually start building our products with generative AI? How do we actually transition there? And what is more challenging is less about the company, but you have to reach the people who are the ambassador in the space, because there are few people who are being the ambassador. For example, the Shopify CEO, a memo, if you folks have not seen, right? They are really pushing, like companies are really pushing people to kind of go in that direction, but they're also finding a lot of naysayers in the company, where they're like, well, look at the quality of output that it gives. It has bias. It cannot do this. There's a lot of, so you have to identify the right folks and also tell them, are you interested in bringing AI tools in the enterprise, which can help the enterprise gain efficiency or better work? Or are you, assuming a lot of you guys are, product managers, you probably want to think about like how AI product management can fundamentally change their course, and how can they slowly introduce that, right? So those are the things that you should kind of get into.
Thank you. Yeah, Shopify, that memo specifically was something I was thinking about too. So thank you for addressing that.
Yeah.
On that line, Vikash, any startups that you're eyeing, looking at, that are doing some good work in this space, just to add to Michelle's question?
A lot of the YC companies which are out there are doing amazing, right? There are companies like, so I call this latent value in the startups. So what is happening is most of the startups who already have customers and they have identified a pain point, just by adding a little bit of sprinkling a little bit of generative AI, there is a latent value that you can like bring out immediately. And so one of the approaches can be just going after existing SaaS startups and pitching them an idea on what you can build, right? That itself can give you a lot of like opportunities, like, hey, for your product, I think, have you guys thought about building a chatbot which can do this? I can actually send out a custom GPT that I built for my another class, where if you plug in like a product, it gives you ideas around how you can step by step introduce generative AI, for example. Right? But there's a lot of action that's going to happen on the developer tools, efficiency. Right now, I love what Cursor is doing, the way they're approaching the co-pilots and a lot of the agentic work.
And that's a good segue to the next question. Louise, do you want to take it? It's actually about AI agents.
Yeah, just coming off mute. Yeah, thank you. That sounds, the content is amazing. Appreciate it. Being a little selfish, I'm looking for AI agent SaaS software. So obviously there's a ton of talk about AI agents. Philosophically, I'm 100% behind it, but I want to put it in my own software product. And therefore, I'm kind of looking for not necessarily open source, but it as a SaaS offering. Have you come across any startups that are offering AI agents as a SaaS tool or open source so that we as product managers can put it in our own product?
So there are a couple of different companies. Crew.ai is one.
Okay.
And there is also, look at, I think relay.app, I believe, is another one that can be used as a agent. But those are two, there are tons of them out there, man. Like, and I'm sure, Shubha, you have some company that you're working on, right? They also do something like that.
So I'm a little biased. I am working at this company that Vikash mentioned, but Louise, you ask an important question. The market is still very focused on the creation of AI agents, and for those, Crew and Relay are great examples that Vikash mentioned. At Wayfound, we help manage the agents. So it's about not only creating the agents, but actually creating agents that do performance management for your agents to a non-technical audience. So not just about uptime and token usage, but actually about whether they're following directives or not. So really thinking about the overall life cycle. So I'd add Wayfound to the mix.
Yeah, and sorry, the two that you mentioned, would you
I
mind
have
putting
it in
them in the
chat.
chat?
So that's
Yeah, great.
crew.ai and relay.app.
Great, thank you so much.
Of course.
And I also pasted my custom GPT that I have, where you can actually plug in any product idea, and it gives you some way of kind of thinking about how should you GenAI it, as well as just feel free to request access to the slides, and I'll just provide that after the call.
That's awesome. We have a couple of private messages in terms of questions, Vikash. So let's tackle that. This is an interesting one. The question is basically around how do you differentiate a good signal versus a bad signal? Because everybody is talking about AI, specifically also generative AI agents. There is actually a fair amount of confusion around some of the terminologies. What is your guidance on, uh, how to position ourselves as people who send out good signals versus adding to the noise?
No, that's a great question. Look, first you need to define your persona. I think a lot of you should probably be thinking about your persona being the builder. And what it means is that every signal that you emit, if you emit a lot of signals, by the way, people will stop paying attention just because they haven't found value in your previous signals, or you emit so many of them, right? That they may not actually be able to kind of like interested in even reading. So your signals, it doesn't matter how strong it is, it's not reaching anywhere. And you're just kind of like killing it by generating so many of them. So the way I try to kind of omit signals around this is, does whatever, even if it's a LinkedIn post, for example, right? Does it significantly add on to my persona of being a builder? And is it providing my POV about building products rather than just kind of sharing about like, hey, did you hear about this cool chat prompt that we have? And like, this is what it can do. This is what, so instead of providing just thoughts which are not well correlated to your persona, converting it into an opportunity which can actually be a question in somebody's mind. If you can find the top question in people's mind today, it could be MCP, for example, is like, and don't just write out and say, what is MCP? And you are like the 501th article, or like the way people kind of come to know about it. What is that one unique insight that you have gained building about MCP? Talk about that. If you're not into writing on LinkedIn or blogs or some of those others, first of all, start considering that, right? It doesn't have to be the frequency at which that you write is not as important, but doing a little bit is important. But create a product that could be the biggest signal that you can provide. Right? By launching a small product, either for as a hobby or as a way of kind of doing it, where you can actually deploy it and like says like, hey guys, over the weekend or like over the last month, I've been thinking about this problem that I really care about. And this is how I built it. And this is how I architected it. And these are the challenges. And this could be one or multiple of them. That one signal will take you so much forward. Like it provides you so much more validation than anything else. And in case of the private discussion, think about like, for example, in a company meeting and in a roadmap meeting that you have within for your product, you may say is like, guys, one of the OKRs that we're going to take, which is I did a year and a half ago in one of the products that I had, is like, hey guys, I know that we are all about ads, but I'm going to take an understand goal of identifying how generative AI can help in our product. And towards that, these are the two mini OKRs with a P20, which is like 20% probability that we'll do it. And this is why it is important. Not only that, I actually went around and talked to the engineers. I talked to the designers, data scientists, everybody else before proposing that. I'm making sure that they also see value in building something like this. Because last thing you want to do is you want to come and provide that signal in a high-level roadmap decision without aligning people around it, without rallying people. So the typical product management applies completely while providing the signals.
No, it's a great point. Thank you so much. We also have Clifton, who's added to the list by saying, there is Zapier has agents, which I think they recently joined. So thanks, Clifton, to add to that add to that list. We have a question from Kapil, specifically regarding engineering efficiency. Kapil, do you want to take the question live?
Yeah, so actually, I've been trying to talk the talk and walk the walk at work. And there's three ways I see we can use AI. There's productivity, internal efficiency, and then customer experiences. But every time I try to get like engineers and designers and so forth on the train, I keep getting blocked saying, oh, we are special, our code base is really archaic, or this doesn't work in Java, and so forth. What are some ways to like mitigate that? And I'm trying to like get like my engineering leaders and design leaders and so to start talking and figuring out how to solve this. Any tips or tricks you can share, Vikash?
Yeah, and your function is what's your
Yeah,
function? Yeah, why are
I'm
you
on the
trying to
product
kind of
side. So
like?
I'm a product leader at Bill.com. And so, but I'm trying to see how can we do 2x, 3x, 4x more with what we have.
Yeah, so this is actually a very interesting problem. This is one of the reasons why the internal memo at Shopify was sent out, right? Because there is a huge amount of pushback internally about adopting a lot of these tools. I would approach it in a couple of different, manners. Number one, your leadership has to be bought in, right? Do as much as you can to drive your leadership to kind of think about it and agree. A lot of times the leadership has a memo like the Shopify one, and then Box founder has also put out like a similar thoughts on LinkedIn. Outside that, use those as validations to kind of show. Also, the fact that use some of the facts. For example, YC announced that 25% of their companies in the last demo day, 95% plus of the code was written by AI. Right? Google talks about like how 25% of the code is written by AI. And what you can potentially do is not go into a broad segment of users and say, hey guys, can we start using AI and put that as an OKR? Find that one passionate engineer who's willing to kind of like work with you. And that really will open up the opportunity and say, look, guys, can you and I work? Of course, be careful around like the IPs and everything else. Like don't send out your code to OpenAI or whatever, right? But that one person who's interested and able to kind of showcase will go a long way from there. And sometimes you have to wait for the opportunity. So I maybe a good time for me to kind of share about my story in the hardware company, where I wanted to kind of switch to AI. We were like a box company, we were shipping boxes into data centers and whatnot, right? But I found this one engineer, distinguished engineer. He's like, hey man, I also like AI. Can we build something cool? And then we started, cooking something on the side, just kind of like taking one of the use cases about like traffic patterns and everything else. Then one of the customers asked about AI. So I pulled him in. I said, hey man, this customer is interested. Maybe 3 of us can talk. Now, because our customer asked, we got like an okay saying like, sure, you can do a demo, but there's no product here or whatever. Like go do a demo or to the customer in like a conference. And that was the case for like 6-8 months, right? And then all of a sudden, one of our competitors announced like an AI product in a conference. The CEO called me in the conference room and says like, hey man, we heard that you're doing something with AI. We have no story. What can be our story? The learning for me from there was you have to be prepared. Like if I just kind of think is like, unless the CEO agrees and the product agrees and everybody agrees, I'm not going to do it. Sometimes you just being ready is what it takes. And maybe you will not get the opportunity, but you will definitely not get the opportunity if you have not been trying or like you're not ready.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. There's another question here, Vikash, which is regarding that circle that you drew in the beginning, the people who talk about AI, know about AI, and actually build AI. And the question is there a smaller circle in that about people who build AI, but actually commercially viable AI software? Because the floor is now so low to build AI products that you could use the Relay.app app, for instance, and start building a lot of what could potentially become mediocre products. Is it important to have commercially viable AI product experience? Does that contribute to a good signal?
Yeah, great question. And I'll probably give a controversial take on this. Look, I don't think there has been yet any commercially viable product launch at all with GenAI, right? Including like the Geminis of the world or like some of the big guys or whatever, right? These products absolutely suck, right? In the way they kind of like provide responses, they have not been able to kind of commercially be viable. However, what is happening is, and you are learning about the nuances of these models. So your goal shouldn't be kind of getting to a commercially viable yet, because you are learning how to swim right now. And making mistakes while you're learning how to swim shouldn't be taken as like, with this kind of swimming, we will never win an Olympics. Or like, we're never going to be like make a living out of this. I think the question that you should ask is like, number one, do you believe the future products will have generative AI? And the number two is just from a career switching point of view, like, are you better off knowing how to build generative AI products and what does not work? Or you're better off just waiting a couple of years and then like starting out when everybody has figured out what the generative AI products are, because the problem areas are going to move somewhere else, right? If these things will become generic. My biggest recommendation to folks who are trying to learn generative AI is to use generative AI, not even build, use generative AI. What I've seen is if you can identify a metric on how many times do you actually use a generative AI product on a weekly or a daily basis, is a very good indicator of how good you are with generative AI product building. For example, when I write my prompts on ChatGPT, on a typical chat, I'm switching at least 15 times the models that I'm using within the same thread. This is important because I understand that this is the type of question only O1 would be good to kind of like, or would be much better at answering. And this is the kind of text that 4.5 will be great at doing. And then I copy some of that context and I put it out to DeepSeek, where I actually get DeepSeek to kind of think about that. Getting to understand why these nuances occur and why those nuances matter is super important in building a generative AI product. Because otherwise you're just kind of like, you will throw it in a prompt in your product and say, I told you it doesn't work. Like, I told you it's not going to be commercially viable. It's going to be true now, but the only way to kind of get to the other side where you actually get to the real value is by building and learning about these products, number one. And number two, remember the AI skill deck that I had. It is super important that you learn about product management as much. And like the thing that I see is people use all of this V0 and like a lot of this fancy tools to kind of build products, to start building solution first products without thinking about problems, without thinking about metrics and everything else. So actually product managers are super important now, because they are the one who can pull you back and say, guys, let's focus on solving a problem rather than building a fancy demo.
You know, this actually brings to mind that we should probably do another session on like AI workflows, like how people actually use it and how you use it, for instance. I think that could be really interesting to see a few examples of that. Because your product on your custom GPT that you built, the product roadmap, tell us a little bit about how you decided to build it and what else are you tinkering with?
So Paul Graham, the YC founder, has a great article which says how to start Google. I'll try to see if I can link his essay. And one of the things he talks about is the best way to start Google or a company like Google is to be a builder. And you know you are a builder if you can't sit idle for a couple of weeks without building something. It doesn't even have to be GenAI, by the way. It doesn't even have to be software. You could be just like building something on your garden, or you're just fixing your desk or something. I think that I have a little bit of a bug myself, like I am always tinkering. And one of the, this GPT I built actually for a new class that I'm teaching, it's called Zero to Launch, where my initial class is focused on foundations of like foundational architecture of what generative AI is and how it is. But because of the trap, that a skill trap, I call it, like that people I see falling into, I said, I'm going to launch a course where you will actually build in 6 weeks, you will build and launch a product with enough signals in it. And this is the GPT that my class uses to kind of like ideate on products that they can build and outcomes, like a real product that they can actually launch, as well as maybe a 2 minutes of YC style video about what this product is and everything else. So that gives them a very high signal content to kind of go out and take to the world.
That's awesome. Truly walking the walk and talking the talk. So great to hear that. I can't believe we're up on time, everybody. Time flies when you're having fun. So thank you all so much for being engaged. Thank you, most importantly, Vikash, for your enlightening discussion. I think I've really learned a lot about, signals and private signals, good versus bad signals. I really appreciate, what you shared. Before we go, it's time for feedback, you guys. So give me a second while I just pull that up, and would love to get your feedback.
Look, thanks a lot, Shubha, and everyone for taking time to kind of join and really engaging questions. So thank you so much for that as well. One thing that if you can do is take 2 or 3 takeaways from this and share with somebody, right? Like share somebody about this, and that should like help you kind of get you some signals out.
Awesome. And Vikash, I did post your LinkedIn, Substack, and your Stanford course for everyone, just as an FYI. So,
Thank you
you
so
know,
much. Yeah.
of course. And we'll take a bit of a 10-second pregnant pause, for everybody to complete feedback. We value feedback a lot, so please do take a moment and offer us feedback. And with that, thank you all so much again for coming, and have a great rest of the day and the week, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you all.